My name is Doris Adams, and for 22 years my only son believed I was a monster. He knew me only through the bitter stories his father told him, through the whispers that followed our family name, and through the cruel nickname they branded me with, the wretched woman. For a long time I carried that name like chains around my ankles, dragging them across every step I took, every job application I filled out, every mirror I looked into. But what Samuel didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the woman they left for dead had clawed her way back to life. And when his voice finally found its way back to my ear after more than 2 decades of silence, it wasn't to mend what was broken, it was to shatter me all over again. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my office, a real office, not the broom closet I'd started in, looking out at the Chicago skyline. 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of view I used to clean for other people. Now it was mine. On my desk sat a stack of property deeds, a cup of tea that had gone cold, and my cell phone. When it rang, the screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Something in my chest, maybe instinct, maybe the pull of blood you can never fully sever, made me answer. Doris, not Mom, not even Mother, just my name spoken like a curse word. I froze. The whole city seemed to go quiet outside my window. I hadn't heard that voice since it was high and sweet, calling for me from a doorway while police officers dragged me away in handcuffs. Now it was deep, cold, and sharp enough to cut. It's Samuel. My hand tightened on the phone. 22 years. 22 years of silence. And this is how he breaks it? I'm getting married, he said, his tone flat and businesslike. Next month, Saturday the 15th. I'm sending you the details. For one foolish heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was an olive branch. Maybe my son had finally looked past the lies. Maybe he wanted his mother at his wedding because he wanted me there. Then he laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Of course you'll want to come, right? I mean, what kind of mother misses her son's wedding? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Everyone's been asking about you. They want to meet the wretched woman. I figured why not let them see for themselves? Let them see what I've been telling them about all these years. The knife twisted deeper. You can sit there in whatever thrift store dress you're wearing these days, and they'll finally understand. They'll see exactly what you are. My throat burned. My eyes stung. But I didn't cry. I stopped crying over Samuel Adams a long time ago. Instead, something else rose up in me. Something harder than grief. Stronger than shame. I pressed the phone closer to my ear and I smiled, not with joy, but with steel. I'll be there, Samuel, I said quietly. Then I hung up. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. My son had just invited me to my own public execution. He thought he was setting the stage for my final humiliation. He thought I'd show up broken, shabby, desperate for scraps of his mercy. He had no idea who I'd become. But to understand why Samuel hated me so much, why his voice carried that much venom, I need to take you back. Back to when I was just Doris, the girl from the South Side who thought marrying Robert Adams meant her hard days were finally behind her. I met Robert when I was 28 years old. He was handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way, worked for his family's trucking company, drove a decent car, had a future, or so I thought. I was working at a hair salon, renting a studio apartment where the heat barely worked in winter. When Robert looked at me like I was something precious, I fell hard. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. His family didn't approve. They made that clear from day one. But I told myself love would be enough. Robert's mother, Patricia Adams, was a tall, thin woman with ice-blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. At our wedding reception, I overheard her whispering to her sister, loud enough for me to catch, "She doesn't belong in this family. Mark my words." I brushed it off. I was young, hopeful, stupid. When Samuel was born 3 years later, I thought maybe things would change. Surely a grandchild would soften Patricia's heart. Surely Robert would stand up for us. I was wrong on both counts. Samuel was everything to me. Big brown eyes, dimpled cheeks, and a laugh that sounded like music. I poured every ounce of myself into being his mother. I stayed up through fevers and nightmares. I worked part-time at the salon to help with bills when Robert's hours got cut. I packed Samuel's lunches with little notes tucked inside, even though he couldn't read yet. I made our small house a home, but in the eyes of the Addams family, none of that mattered. To them, I was the reason their golden boy wasn't thriving. I was the anchor dragging him down. The wrong choice he'd made one drunken night that he was now stuck with. The beginning of the end came when Samuel was 5. Robert's trucking routes dried up. The business was failing. He'd made bad deals, borrowed money from the wrong people, kept sloppy books. I didn't know the details. Robert never talked to me about business. I signed papers when he asked me to, trusting him when he said, "Just routine paperwork, honey, don't worry about it." God, I was naive. When the IRS came knocking, when the debts piled up, when the whole operation started collapsing like a house of cards, the Addams family needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. Patricia orchestrated the whole thing. I know that now. She met with their lawyer. She coached Robert. She made sure every finger pointed at me. The black wife. The outsider. The one nobody would believe. She handled the books, Robert told the investigators, his eyes unable to meet mine. She was always the one dealing with the money. I trusted her with everything, Patricia added, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My poor son. He didn't know what she was doing behind his back. I screamed that I was innocent. I begged them to look at the real records. I told anyone who would listen that I'd only signed what Robert told me to sign, that I'd never touched the business accounts. Nobody believed me. The trial was a nightmare. My public defender was overworked and underpaid, going through the motions. The Addams family hired a sharp lawyer who made me look like a criminal mastermind. The jury, 11 white faces and one who wouldn't look at me, deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 8 years in state prison. The day they took me away, Samuel was standing in the doorway of our house. He was wearing his favorite Superman pajamas. His little hands gripped the doorframe so tight his knuckles went white. He was crying. No, wailing, screaming for me as the officers put handcuffs on my wrists. "Mama, Mama, don't go, Mama!" I tried to run to him. I fought against those handcuffs so hard I left bruises on my wrists that lasted for weeks. "Samuel, baby, Mama didn't do it. Mama loves you. I'll come back, I promise, I'll come back." But Patricia was already there, pulling him away from the door, covering his ears with her hands like my voice was poison. "Don't listen to her lies, sweetheart," she cooed. "She made her choices. She doesn't love you. If she did, she wouldn't have done this." That was the last time I saw my son's face for 22 years. That was the last time he called me Mama. Prison is a place designed to break you. The bars, the guards, the strip searches, the fluorescent lights that buzz all night, and the screaming that echoes down the cell blocks. But the hardest part wasn't the physical imprisonment. It was knowing my son was growing up without me. It was knowing he was being taught to hate me. The first Mother's Day, I waited by the mail window like a fool. I'd written Samuel a letter, crayons on construction paper, like a child's drawing, because I wanted him to know I still thought of him. I told him about the birds I could see from my cell window. I told him I loved him more than all the stars in the sky. The letter came back. Return to sender. No such person at this address. I tried again and again. Over 8 years, I sent 347 letters. Not one was answered. Through whispers and rumors and the occasional sympathetic guard who knew someone, I pieced together fragments of Samuel's life. He was doing well in school. He played basketball. He called Robert's new wife, Linda, Mom. He told his friends his real mother was dead, or in prison, which was the same thing. He never asked about me. Every piece of information was a knife to the heart. Some of the women in prison numbed themselves with whatever they could smuggle in. Some carved lines into their arms just to feel something other than the emptiness. Some gave up entirely, shuffling through their days like ghosts. I couldn't afford to give up. Because every night, lying on that thin mattress that smelled like bleach and despair, I made myself a promise. I will survive this. I will rise. And one day, my son will know the truth. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I held on to that promise like a lifeline. When I walked out of prison on a gray October morning, nobody was waiting for me. No family, no friends, no son, just me, a plastic bag with $40 in state-issued cash, and a bus ticket to nowhere. I stood outside those prison gates, breathing in air that tasted like freedom and ash, and I had a choice. I could lie down and die, like they expected me to, or I could stand up and prove them all wrong. The halfway house was on the south side, in a neighborhood I used to know. Thin walls, strict curfews, women who looked at me with the same hollow eyes I saw in the mirror. I took a bed in a room I shared with 3 other women, hung my one change of clothes in a locker, and started looking for work. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? That question was on every application. And every time I checked yes, I watched the person across from me change. Their smile would fade. Their eyes would harden. The interview would suddenly be over. "We'll call you," they'd say. They never called. I scrubbed toilets in motels where the guests never looked at me. I flipped burgers at diners where the manager paid me under the table. I cleaned office buildings after hours, pushing a mop down empty hallways while the ghosts of my old life whispered in my ears. It wasn't dignified, but it was survival. At night, while the other women watched TV or chased men or drank themselves numb, I went to the public library. I read everything I could find about real estate, finance, business management. I took notes in spiral notebooks I bought at the dollar store. I studied until my eyes burned and my hand cramped. I told myself, knowledge is the only thing they can't take from me. Slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, I started saving money. $5 here, $10 there. I stopped buying coffee. I walked instead of taking the bus. I wore the same 3 outfits until the seams frayed. After 6 months, I had $400. After a year, I moved out of the halfway house into a studio apartment. 1 room, a hot plate, a bathroom I didn't have to share. I cried the day I signed the lease, not from joy, but from the quiet dignity of having a door that locked from the inside. But I was still alone, still invisible, still carrying the weight of a son who thought I'd abandoned him. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was cleaning houses for cash. One of my regulars was an elderly woman named Ruth Williams. She lived alone in a small house in Hyde Park, surrounded by books and photographs of a life well lived. She was 70 years old, with silver hair, warm brown skin, and eyes that saw right through you. I'd been cleaning for her for 3 weeks when she stopped me in the kitchen. "Doraz," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Sit down. Let's talk." I hesitated. Employers didn't usually want to talk to the help. "Sit," she repeated. I sat. Ruth poured 2 cups of tea, set one in front of me, and looked at me with those knowing eyes. "I know who you are," she said. My stomach dropped. Here it comes, I thought. Another door slamming in my face. "I was a social worker for 40 years, Ruth continued. "I followed your case, read the trial transcripts. Something about it never sat right with me." She leaned forward. "They railroaded you, didn't they?" I couldn't speak. Nobody had believed me in nearly 9 years. "I can't change what happened," Ruth said softly. "But I can tell you this. You look like someone who's been through hell and came out the other side. That tells me you're a fighter, and fighters don't stay down." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You can stay here, in my guest room. No rent. Just keep the house clean and help me with errands. And Doris?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "Whatever you're planning to do with your life, do it. Don't let them win." I broke down crying right there at her kitchen table. For the first time since that courtroom, someone saw me. Not the felon, not the wretched woman, just me. Ruth Williams became my guardian angel, my mentor, the mother I'd lost when mine passed years before. And 2 years later, when Ruth died peacefully in her sleep, she left me something that changed everything. $15,000, her life savings, and a note. Use this to build, not to mourn. Make me proud. Ruth, I stood in that little house, holding that check, and I made a vow. I will build an empire. And when Samuel sees me again, he won't see the wretched woman they told him about. He'll see the truth. Ruth's funeral was small. Just me, a handful of her former colleagues, and a pastor who spoke about a life of service. I stood by her casket in a black dress I'd bought at Goodwill, and I made her a promise. I won't waste this gift. I'll make you proud. That night, I spread Ruth's financial records across my tiny kitchen table. $15,000. It might as well have been $15 million for all the possibilities it represented. But I knew better than to treat it carelessly. This wasn't lottery money to blow on a new car or fancy clothes. This was seed money. Investment capital. This was my only shot. I spent 3 weeks doing nothing but research. Every morning I woke at 5, made instant coffee, walked to the Harold Washington Library and claimed the same computer terminal. I studied real estate markets, rental yields, property management, landlord-tenant law. I learned terms like cash-on-cash return and 1031 exchange and capitalization rate. The librarians started recognizing me. One of them, a young woman named Maria, would save printouts of Zillow listings she thought I'd find interesting. "You really doing this?" she asked one afternoon. "Buying property?" "Yes," I said. "Not maybe. Not I hope so. Just yes." She smiled. "Good for you." I focused on the South Side, the neighborhoods I'd grown up in, the ones I understood, and I looked for one specific thing: distressed properties, foreclosures, estate sales, homes that had been abandoned or neglected, the kind nobody else wanted to touch, because those were the ones I could afford. I found it on a Thursday, 6247 South Champlain Avenue, a narrow brick 2-flat boarded windows, overgrown yard. The listing said estate sale as is, cash only. The asking price was $14,000. I called the number. A tired-sounding man answered. "It needs work," he warned. "A lot of work. Roof leaks, plumbing's shot. I'm selling for my aunt's estate, and we just want it gone." "I'll give you $12,000, I said, my heart pounding. "Cash, close in 2 weeks." He paused. "Make it $12,500 and you got a deal." I took a breath. That would leave me only $2,500 for renovations. It was barely enough, but something in my gut said this was the one. "Deal," I said. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of that house with a key in my hand. The inside was worse than I'd imagined. Water damage on the ceilings, broken fixtures, holes in the walls where copper pipes had been stolen. The kitchen was gutted. The bathroom was unusable. A normal person would have walked away. But I'd survived 8 years in prison. I'd been framed, abandoned, and left for dead. A broken house didn't scare me. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I couldn't afford contractors, so I became one. YouTube became my teacher. I watched videos on basic plumbing, electrical work, drywall repair. I learned how to patch holes, replace fixtures, install laminate flooring. For the big jobs, the roof, the furnace, the electrical panel, I found handymen willing to barter. I cleaned their houses, did their bookkeeping, cooked meals for their families. Whatever it took. I worked 18-hour days. My hands blistered, then calloused. My back ached. I fell asleep every night, too exhausted to dream. But slowly, impossibly, that wreck of a house began to transform. I painted the walls soft gray, installed cheap but clean IKEA furniture, hung curtains, added plants. I staged it like I was selling a dream, not just renting a room. 4 months after I bought it, I took pictures with a borrowed camera and posted the listing on a platform I'd been reading about. Airbnb. Cozy Chicago retreat in historic Bronzeville. $45 night. I priced it low, hoping for just one booking. Just one person willing to take a chance on me. The first booking came 3 days later. A college student visiting from Michigan. He stayed 2 nights, left a 5-star review, Clean, quiet, great communication. Would definitely stay again. That review changed everything. Within a month, I was booked solid. Travelers loved the location, the price, the personal touches. I left welcome baskets with snacks and local maps. I responded to messages within minutes. I went above and beyond because I needed those reviews, needed that reputation, needed to prove I was trustworthy. The money started coming in. $400 a month, then $600, then $1,000. I didn't spend a penny on myself. Every dollar went back into the house or into savings. I ate ramen noodles and day-old bread. I wore the same jeans until they had holes. I walked everywhere to save on bus fare. After 8 months, I had enough for a down payment on a second property. This one was a small single-family home in Inglewood. $7,000, even more rundown than the first. But I knew the formula now. Buy cheap, renovate smart, list it, let the cash flow build. Property number 2 was ready in 3 months, listed at $50 a night, booked within the week. Then came property 3, then 4. I learned to spot undervalued properties from a mile away. I learned which neighborhoods were about to gentrify, where the city was planning new developments, which blocks had good bones beneath the neglect. I became an expert in zoning laws, tax auctions, and creative financing. By my 5th year out of prison, I owned 8 properties across Chicago. By year 7, I'd expanded to Milwaukee and Detroit, cities with the same story as Chicago, places where nobody was paying attention to the neighborhoods I knew would come back. The money grew, slowly at first, then faster. $10,000 a month in revenue, then 15, then 25. I still lived in a tiny studio apartment, still drove a beat-up Toyota Camry, still wore clothes from thrift stores. To the world, I was just another black woman scraping by. Nobody looked twice at me. That's exactly how I wanted it. Because I'd learned something important. Power is most dangerous when it's invisible, but no matter how much I built, I couldn't stop thinking about Samuel. Every success felt hollow without him. Every property I bought, every check I deposited, I thought, does he know? Does he care? Does he ever wonder where I am? I needed to know, so I hired someone. His name was David Thompson, 42 years old, former Chicago PD detective who'd left the force and started a private investigation firm. He also did real estate consulting on the side, which is how I met him. When I told him I needed someone found, he didn't ask questions. Name? He said, pen ready. Samuel Adams, 27 years old, lives somewhere in the Chicago suburbs. David's eyes flickered with recognition. He'd probably heard of the case, but he stayed professional. What do you need? Everything, I said. Where he lives, where he works, who he's with. Just, I need to know he's okay. David looked at me for a long moment. This is your son. Yes. And he doesn't know you're looking for him. No, and I want to keep it that way. He nodded slowly. I'll be discreet. David's first report came 2 weeks later. Samuel Adams, age 27, marketing executive at a mid-sized firm downtown. Salary approximately $70,000 a year. Living in a rented townhouse in Oak Park. Engaged to Jessica Hayes, 26, elementary school teacher. No criminal record. No debt problems. By all accounts, a normal, successful young man. But the report also included something else. Interviews David had conducted with Samuel's friends and co-workers. Sam's a great guy. Little guarded, though. Doesn't talk about his family much. He mentioned once that his mom died when he was young. Or maybe she was in prison. I don't remember. Yeah, he said something about her abandoning him. He doesn't like to talk about it. Each word was a knife. My son had erased me. To him, I was either dead or a shameful secret not worth mentioning. There's one more thing, David said when we met for coffee. He slid a folder across the table. I did some digging into your original case, the financial fraud charges. I stiffened. Why? Because something didn't sit right. I read the trial transcripts. The evidence against you was circumstantial at best, but there was one person whose testimony really buried you. Gerald Peterson, the accountant. I remembered that name. Gerald had testified that I'd instructed him to falsify records, that I'd been the one managing the shady deals. It was a lie, but the jury believed him. What about him? I asked. David leaned forward. He's still alive. 74 now, retired, living in Naperville. And here's the interesting part. He tapped the folder. 6 months after your trial, Patricia Adams paid off his mortgage. $200,000 straight up. Public record. My blood went cold. She bought his testimony. That'd be my guess. Can we prove it? David hesitated. Not without him admitting it. And why would he? I stared at the folder. After all these years, here was a thread, a chance at the truth. Find him, I said quietly. I want to talk to him. It took David 3 weeks to set up the meeting. Gerald Peterson lived in a modest ranch house with a well-kept lawn. When he answered the door, I saw a frail old man, hunched and gray, wearing a cardigan despite the warm weather. David made the introductions. Mr. Peterson, this is Doris Adams. The color drained from Gerald's face. I don't want any trouble, he said immediately. I'm not here for trouble, I said, keeping my voice calm. I'm here for the truth. He tried to close the door. David put his foot in the way. Mr. Peterson, David said gently, we know about the money, the mortgage payment from Patricia Adams. We know what you did. Gerald's hands started shaking. I was just following orders, he whispered. She said if I didn't testify, she'd make sure I lost everything. My job, my pension, everything. I had a family to think about. You sent an innocent woman to prison, I said, my voice breaking despite myself. He looked at me with watery eyes. I know. I've lived with that for 25 years. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. I have stage 4 lung cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I don't want to die carrying this. He shuffled to a desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were financial documents, the real books from Adams Trucking, every entry in Gerald's handwriting, every fraudulent transaction signed by Robert, not me. This proves it, he said. Robert and Patricia did everything. You were the scapegoat. I took the folder with trembling hands. Why now? I asked. Because I'm dying, he said simply. And because I want to be able to face my maker with a clean conscience. If there's any way I can help clear your name, I'll do it. I'll testify. I'll sign an affidavit. Whatever you need. David and I walked back to the car in silence. I held the folder against my chest like it was made of gold. You can reopen your case with this, David said. Sue for wrongful conviction. Go after Patricia and Robert for fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering. I stared out the window. I could clear my name. I could get justice. I could expose them all. But something held me back. Not yet, I said finally. David looked at me, surprised. Why not? Because if I do this now, Samuel will think I'm just trying to buy his love. He'll think it's all about money and lawyers and revenge. I looked down at the folder. No, I need him to see who I've become first. I need him to see the woman I built from nothing. And then? And then, I said, a cold smile crossing my face, he'll understand that I didn't just survive. I conquered. I had my proof. I had my weapon. Now I just needed the right moment to use it. 2 months later, my phone rang. Doris, it's Samuel. And I knew the moment had come. Samuel's voice cut through the phone like a blade. I'm getting married next month, Saturday the 15th. The rest of his words were predictable. The sarcasm, the cruelty, the invitation meant to humiliate. I let him finish his rehearsed speech. I'll be there, Samuel, I said quietly, and hung up. Then I got to work. David Thompson arrived at my office the next morning. You're really doing this, he said, not a question. I am. I slid a list across my desk. I need these arrangements made, discreetly. His eyes scanned the list. Rolls-Royce ghost rental, 2 executive protection specialists, a private tailor, a meeting with my attorney to prepare documents. You're going to war, David said. No, I leaned back in my chair. I'm going to a wedding, but I'm going on my terms. The Rolls-Royce Ghost arrived on Friday. Midnight silver, pristine. The kind of car that makes people stop and stare. The rental company delivered it to my building's underground garage where no one could see. I ran my hand along its smooth surface and smiled. Samuel wanted a ghost from his past. He'd get one, just not the broken specter he expected. The bodyguards came next. Marcus and James, both former Secret Service, both 6'3" and 240 pounds of quiet professionalism. They wore tailored black suits and earpieces and moved like shadows. "We understand this is a family event," Marcus said during our briefing. "We'll maintain distance, but stay visible. Our presence alone will establish boundaries." "Perfect," he said. The outfit took 3 fittings. A tailored suit in midnight navy, the color of power and dignity. The jacket nipped at the waist, the pants cut to perfection. Underneath, a silk blouse in ivory. A strand of South Sea pearls that cost more than my first property. Heels, Louboutin, red-soled, confidence in shoe form. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who commanded boardrooms. A woman who'd built an empire from $40 and a broken heart. I saw the woman Samuel had never met. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk with Gerald Peterson's documents spread before me. Proof of my innocence, proof of their guilt. My finger traced the signatures, the dates, the evidence that could destroy Robert and Patricia. But that wasn't why I was going tomorrow. I pulled out something else. A worn photograph I kept in a locked drawer. Samuel at age 4, grinning gap-toothed, his small hand wrapped around mine. Taken before everything fell apart. Before the lies. Before the prison gates. "Tomorrow, baby," I whispered to the photo. "Tomorrow you'll see the truth." Saturday arrived clear and bright. The wedding was at Meridian Country Club, all manicured lawns and white columns, the kind of place that screamed old money and exclusivity. I'd driven past places like this countless times, cleaning their offices after hours. Now I was arriving as a guest. The Rolls-Royce glided up the circular drive at exactly 2:30 p.m. during the cocktail hour when guests were mingling on the terrace. Perfect timing for maximum impact. People noticed the car before they noticed me. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Someone said, "Is that a ghost?" Another voice, "Who is that?" The car stopped at the main entrance. Marcus stepped out first, scanning the area with professional precision. Then he opened my door. I took a breath. This was it. I stepped out. The afternoon sun caught my pearls, my silver hair styled in an elegant bob, my suit fitting like armor. My heels clicked against the stone walkway with the sound of inevitability. For a moment, the entire terrace went silent. Then the whispers started. On Jessica's side, guests who didn't know me, polite smiles, curious glances, a few women nodding appreciatively at my outfit. On Samuel's side, the reaction was different. I watched Robert's champagne glass slip from his hand, shattering against the flagstone. His face went from pink to white to gray. Patricia's mouth opened in a silent gasp, her hand clutching her chest like she was having a heart attack. And Samuel had been laughing with his groomsmen, confident and relaxed in his tuxedo. He turned at the commotion, saw the Rolls-Royce, saw my bodyguards, saw me. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. His knees buckled slightly. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. I didn't look at him. Not yet. Instead, I walked straight to Jessica. She stood radiant in her white gown, her eyes wide with confusion, but her smile still in place. I extended my hand. "Congratulations. I'm Doris Adams, Samuel's mother." The silence that followed could have swallowed the world. Jessica's hand trembled as she took mine. Thank you. I didn't know you were... Samuel said... She trailed off, realizing she was about to say something that would reveal exactly what Samuel had told her. "It's all right," I said gently. "I'm sure he told you many things. Some of them might even be true." Behind me, I heard Samuel's voice, strangled. "What are you doing here?" Now I turned. My son stood 20 feet away, surrounded by his groomsmen, all of them staring. He looked good, handsome in his tuxedo, successful, grown. But his eyes held something I recognized from the mirror, pain that hadn't healed. "You invited me," I said simply. "Remember?" The reception began with the usual speeches. Best man stories, maid of honor tears, Jessica's father welcoming Samuel into the family. Everything normal, everything perfect, except for the undercurrent of whispers about the mysterious woman in navy who sat at table 12 with 2 intimidating men flanking her. Then Patricia stood. She was drunk. I could tell by the way she swayed slightly, by the brightness in her eyes. She raised her glass and the room quieted. "I just want to say how proud we are of Samuel," she began, her voice too loud. "He's overcome so much in his life, so many challenges." Her eyes found me across the room. "He's shown such grace, such maturity, inviting his mother here today despite everything she did." Murmurs of confusion rippled through Jessica's family. "It takes a special man to forgive abandonment," Patricia continued. "To forgive betrayal. To rise above the sins of a parent who chose crime over her own child." A few guests applauded uncertainly. Others looked uncomfortable, sensing something was wrong but not knowing what. I stood. The scrape of my chair silenced the room. All eyes turned to me. Samuel half rose from his seat, his face panicked. "May I say a few words?" I asked, my voice carrying clear and calm across the reception hall. I didn't wait for permission. "Truth." I let the word hang in the air. "That's a word I haven't heard from this family in 25 years. Gasps. Someone dropped silverware. "I've been called the wretched woman, the criminal, the mother who abandoned her child." I looked directly at Patricia. "Let me tell you what really happened. 25 years ago, I was framed." The words hit like a bomb. Jessica's parents exchanged shocked glances. Samuel's friends looked confused. Robert stared at his plate. "I signed papers I thought were routine because I trusted my husband." I gestured to Robert, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "When his family's business failed, they needed someone to blame, and I was convenient." "That's a lie!" Patricia shrieked. "You were convicted. A jury that heard false testimony," I interrupted, my voice sharp as steel. I pulled Gerald Peterson's documents from my purse. "From an accountant who was paid to lie. Gerald Peterson confessed before he died. He gave me the real financial records." I held up the folder. "These prove I never touched those books. Every fraudulent entry is in Gerald's handwriting, signed by Robert. Not one bears my signature." The room erupted in whispers. "I was stolen from my son," I continued, my voice rising. "Dragged away in handcuffs while he cried for me." "And his family," I looked at Patricia, at Robert, "made sure he never heard from me again." "I sent 347 letters to Samuel. Did you get even one?" I asked, looking at my son for the first time. Samuel sat frozen, his face a mask of shock. "No," I answered for him, "because they intercepted every single one." I turned back to the room. For 25 years, I let him hate me because I thought maybe he was happier believing the lie. But I didn't abandon you, Samuel. I survived prison. I survived poverty. I worked 3 jobs, studied at night, saved every penny. My voice grew stronger. I built a real estate portfolio worth $8 million. I own 47 properties across 4 states. I did it without your father's name, without this family's help, without anything but my own determination. Someone in the crowd gasped. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. "You invited me here to humiliate me," I said directly to Samuel. "You wanted everyone to see the wretched woman. But I'm not ashamed. I'm proud. Proud I survived what they did to me. Proud I rose from nothing. Proud I'm still standing." I raised my glass. "To truth, may it always find the light." I drank and sat down. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Samuel exploded. "Shut up!" He shot to his feet, his chair toppling backward. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to ruin my wedding with your lies." His face was purple, veins bulging in his neck. Jessica reached for him, but he jerked away. "Where were you?" he shouted, voice breaking. "Where were you on my birthdays, my graduations, when I needed a mother?" "In prison," I said quietly, standing to face him. "Writing you letters you never received. Working every job I could find. Building a life so that one day you might see I wasn't the monster they said I was. I needed you!" The words tore out of him, raw and aching. "I needed someone to—" His voice cracked. He turned on Robert. "You told me she didn't care. You said she chose crime over me." Robert said nothing. Samuel whirled to Patricia. "Tell me she's lying, grandmother. Tell me—" "She deserved prison," Patricia snapped, too drunk to control herself. "She was taking you away from us. We had to protect you from her." The accidental confession hung in the air like smoke. Jessica stood slowly, her face pale. You lied to him? His whole life?" 30 minutes later, Samuel and I stood in a private room off the hall. Jessica had insisted on being there. The three of us, away from the chaos. "Why didn't you find me after prison?" Samuel asked, his voice small, broken. "Why didn't you come?" "Your father got a restraining order," I said gently. "Said I was dangerous. I tried. But I had to stay in the shadows." I pulled out my phone, showed him photos I'd taken over the years. Samuel at his high school graduation, photographed from across the street. Samuel at his first job, captured through a coffee shop window. "I was always there, baby. You just couldn't see me." Jessica spoke up, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Adams, Samuel got a scholarship for college. An anonymous one. For $40,000. The letter said it was from someone who believes in second chances." I said nothing. Samuel's eyes widened. "That was you?" "You deserved an education," I said softly, "even if you hated me." He broke, not physically, but emotionally. All the anger, all the certainty, all the hate he'd carried for 25 years collapsed. He sank into a chair, hands over his face, shoulders shaking. "My whole life was a lie," he whispered. I knelt beside him, reached for his hand. This time he didn't pull away. "I won't force you to love me," I said. "I won't demand forgiveness. I came here so you'd know the truth. What you do with it is your choice." I stood to leave. "Wait," he said, his voice barely audible. I paused. "I don't know if we can." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't have to fix it today," I said gently. "But Samuel, build your marriage on truth. Don't let lies poison what you love." I walked to the door, my bodyguards falling into step. "Mom," he said. I stopped. He hadn't called me that in 22 years. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know, baby. I know." The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Dear Mom, I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from this, but I'm trying. Jessica and I are in therapy. We're working through it together. I pressed charges against Dad and Grandmother. The district attorney is reviewing your case for wrongful conviction. It's not much, but it's something. I'm not ready to see you yet. But maybe someday. Maybe when I'm stronger. Thank you for the scholarship. Thank you for watching over me when I didn't know you were there. Thank you for not giving up. Your son, Samuel." I sat in my office, a real office, in a building I owned, and cried. Not tears of pain, but of hope. On my desk sat a framed photograph. Ruth Williams, smiling in her kitchen, the day she told me to rise. "We did it, Ruth," I whispered. "We survived." That afternoon I stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. A new building in Hyde Park, renovated with care, painted in Ruth's favorite colors. The sign read, "Ruth's House, a second chance home for formerly incarcerated women." Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions. For the first time in my life, I let them take my picture. I let them tell my story. Because I was no longer hiding. I was Doris Adams. I had been called wretched. I had been broken and buried and left for dead. But I refused to stay down. And in the end, that made all the difference.